Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to take a look at Level Up Gateway, the online character builder for Level Up Advanced 5e. I have a slight correction on the Lord of the Rings 5e topic that I talked about last week. We're going to look at a new lightweight RPG called Wanna Play Right Now that's intended for you to just teach people what role-playing is like in mere seconds. Today's big topic is going to be the top RPG products used at the table. What are some of the notable products that people came back with when I asked the question, what products do you find yourself returning to time and again to help you prep and run your games? We're going to talk about that. And we have our first batch of questions from the December 2024 Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. This show is brought to you by the patrons of Flourish. Patrons get access to awesome tips, tricks, tools, accessories to help them run their tabletop role-playing games. They get access to the awesome Lazy GM community over on Discord, and they help me put on shows like this. Please consider becoming a patron of Flourish. It's a great way to help support the work that I do. And to the patrons of Flourish, thank you so much for your outstanding support. So we've talked a lot about D&D Beyond. We talked about D&D Beyond competitors. We've seen Roll20 coming out with a new character builder. We know about Nexus and their ability to come up with a character builder. We've seen how you can build Tales of the Valiant characters using Shard Tabletop. We have a new one, and that new one is the Level Up Gateway. So Level Up Gateway is designed by EN World Publishing, the creators of Level Up Advanced 5e. Level Up Advanced 5e is kind of the first, no, I don't know, it's probably not the first, probably the first biggest 5e complete fork. So the idea was it is a completely self-contained version of 5e built on 5e rules that expand the rule set for 5th edition D&D into a new thing. So the Adventurer's Guide is there, Trials and Treasure is there, and the Monstrous Menagerie is there. If you followed me at all, if you listened to my stuff in the past, you know how much I absolutely love Trials and Treasure and the Monstrous Menagerie as two awesome 5e accessories that you can use for any of your 5e games, whether you're playing D&D 2014 or 2024, Tales of Valiant or whatever. Those books work really, really well for 5e. And I have been running a Level Up Advanced 5e game for my Wednesday game, and we've been doing that. Since they did the Kickstarter, they have talked about wanting to build a character builder for it, but it's taken some time for them to do so. But they now have an alpha version of that character builder available to the people who originally backed it and their players. And I'm going to give you a quick glimpse of it today. But there is an article you can find linked in the show notes that talks all about it. And one of the interesting things is that one of the things I heard Morris talk about on the EN World podcast is like, we laughed about D&D Beyond and said, like, you know, it only cost them $130 million to get a tool to build a character for D&D. And he was like, yeah, the problem is like not every company is just sitting on $130 million to be able to hire 90 developers for multiple years in order to build a character builder. And then he started working with somebody and he's like, well, we actually have one that feels very much like D&D Beyond. And it certainly didn't cost $130 million, and we can do it for Level Up Gateway. I was one of the backers of the website, or one of the backers of the Kickstarter back when it came out. So I actually have access to it, and I can show it to you today. Now, it's an alpha test, and unfortunately for me and for my players, isn't particularly useful because it only really goes up to 5th level in any of the given character classes, and my characters are already level 8. So I actually did dutifully pass out all the codes to all of my players so they could try it out, and they immediately hit the wall and said, well, it doesn't work for my character because we're level 8. So that's a bummer. My understanding, having talked to Morris about this in an email exchange that we had back and forth, is the next big plan is increase more levels and add more stuff to it. Still, very powerful tool. On my phone, I woke up one morning, I'm sitting in bed, I pull out my phone, I go, saw the thing, logged in, create an account, and built a fighter. Idarian is my fighter, a first level fighter elf. I'm not going to go through the whole build process on how you make a character, but it's pretty straightforward. But you can see the results of this character is a very D&D Beyond-like interface where you have all your ability scores, you have your other things. There's definitely some Level Up Advanced 5e ideas in here, certain things that you'll see with skill specialization and whatnot. And of course, you can click on a thing and it will roll a die. I think it takes a little bit for the die to, yeah, there it is. Once the die has loaded into memory, and I got to be careful when this browser's been crashing. You can roll a die just like you roll in D&D Beyond and get it in a little dice system here. So it's got access to all of your spells. You can do a quick search for spells and get information on spells. You can do your combat maneuvers and find all your combat maneuvers. Combat maneuvers is probably the real there's a few differences between Level Up Advanced 5e and like D&D 2014 or 2024 and other versions of 5e. Combat maneuvers is probably the big one, which is a list of maneuvers that martial characters get that's as extensive as the spell lists that spellcasters get. Huge list of different ones, and just as big. And like you can click on them here, and you can see like what they do and how they work and everything like that, and when you can pick them up, all sorts of stuff like that. Really cool to see it work, and neat to see it in operation. And I look forward to watching it build up. I'm just happy to have alternatives. What's neat about this one is it's a completely separate alternative to anything involving D&D. I like D&D. I love D&D. And I still play D&D, and I still use D&D Beyond for character building. My game that I ran last night, players were using D&D Beyond. I don't use it as a DM. I just use my own little notes and my own books and things. Actually, I was using Level Up Advanced 5e books on the GM side. My players were using D&D Beyond on their side. But there are definitely some who would rather have their version of their high-end fantasy RPG, their 5e-based RPG, without having to work with anything involving D&D or Hasbro or anything like that. And this is one of those options where the entire system from top to bottom is independently published by a completely different company, funded by completely different means, and is available to them. So that's nice. I mean, that's nice if you want it. Like, if that matters to you, this is that kind of option that's available to you. I don't subscribe to that. I think that I can still enjoy and play D&D just fine and enjoy doing so. Now, it still doesn't solve the other problem of this is still a centralized service. I think it's highly unlikely you have to worry about Elon Musk buying World and taking over this application on you. But as an independent company with their own independent financing and everything else, they might find it financially unable to continue to support the tool. And that means the tool itself could just go away on its own. And if you are heavily invested in the tool and like lots of numbers of characters, or generally your game is expecting that you have this tool available, that could be a problem. And there's no kind of decentralized version of this. There's no open source version that you can host on a different server. It is a web-based application, so you can't run it offline. All of those kinds of things are still a concern and an issue when it comes to digital character building, and that's something to consider when you're investing in this. I did talk to Morris about monetization of this. I said, what are you going to do about that? And his answer basically was, we don't know. We don't know what we're going to do. Right now it's free. They said the same thing about A5e Tools, which we're going to take a look at. That A5e Tools is also free. And there's always like, we might monetize it sometime. I think he mentioned something along the lines of like, that core stuff would be available for free in one system, and then there'd be a more advanced system that you might pay to get into that has other added stuff. Seems reasonable to me. Again, it's a high expense to make an application like this. It's not something you can just whip out for free. We can't just expect that everybody gets everything for free all the time, because it takes money and energy and effort, and people need to live and eat in order to be able to make tools like this. While we are talking about Level Up Gateway, so it's going to be fun to watch Level Up Gateway grow as it grows, but we should not forget about A5e Tools. And I think a lot of people don't even really know that this exists, and it's really, really powerful. So Level Up Advanced 5e, the A5e.tools, you can find a link to it in the show notes, is a completely free, very D&D Beyond-like library. Sometimes they call these like a compendium, but it's all of the Level Up Advanced 5e rules, including monsters and spells and character abilities, and even the information of the core books is all available online on this one tool that is both available in a web browser and a desktop, but also available online on your phone. And it has everything from like the rule books. If you want to see the Adventurer's Guide for Level Up Advanced 5e, you can see the entire Adventurer's Guide here, everything about it. You want to see those combat maneuvers list? You can click the combat maneuvers section and read about it, and you can get to, all the maneuvers themselves and read each one, again, in a very, what I would consider to be a pretty good D&D Beyond-like interface for all of this stuff. Those are the rule books themselves, sources, Adventurer's Guide, Trials and Treasure, the Dungeon Delver's Guide are all available. Monsters, the Monstrous Menagerie is here, and also other books that World has published are there. So you can find all of the information from the Monstrous Menagerie in here as well. If you go to the monsters themselves, I don't think it has it does. So I was gonna say, I don't think it has everything that's in the book, but it does. It has the encounter section, has the monster type and descriptions. I find some of these really, really valuable. Right, the description of the monster is one thing, behavior in combat is another, encounters, what kind of creatures would lurk around with an abolithic brute. Very, very good, and all sortable by this list. Again, completely free, no login, all directly available on your phone or your browser. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to do anything at all. You get full access to the entire compendium there. And again, it's one of these where I've heard Morris say like, yeah, we got to figure out how to monetize this somehow, but it's been available for years. Can you guarantee it's going to be available forever? No, because again, it's a centralized server and everything like that. However, World Publishing does publish pretty much everything that's available in Level Up Advanced 5e is also released under Creative Commons license in their system reference documents. Those you can download. I have a copy. You should go get a copy. I'll link to it in the show notes. But you can get an entire copy of this entirely separate version of 5e in a Creative Commons attribution license, which means you can use it in your own commercial works. You can use it in different licenses of your own. Really, really good stuff. I am actually using the Level Up Advanced 5e system reference document as the SRD that I reference in the City of Arches. So City of Arches is tied to this, not to the 5.1 SRD, which confuses people, but totally did it and works really great. So don't forget about A5e tools. You can find that in the show notes as well. Last week, I talked about the Lord of the Rings 5e. We were talking about Lord of the Rings 5e being available on D&D Beyond. And one of the things I thought was particularly interesting about Lord of the Rings on D&D Beyond was that it was a complete 5e, separate 5e system that was kind of shoehorned into the existing D&D 2014/2024 character builder on D&D Beyond. And is really the first time that has added a entire other 5e system to their platform. But I made one error, which is I said that it was completely independent, and that's not really true. I did, by the way, get, and sorry to gloat, but if you didn't get it, you missed out on a $25 sale on the physical version of the Lord of the Rings 5e book, and the PDF was available for $25 on Black Friday. And I ordered, and it's a really beautiful book. I really, really like this book. I did hear that One Ring is also a really good version that you should probably check out, but I was happy to get the 5e version. And feeling like that license may not always be there, I was like, it'll be nice to have a physical copy that nobody can take from me. But if you go to the Lord of the Rings, we're going to go to D&D Beyond, and we're going to go to sources. Again, because I'm a D&D Beyond insider, because I used to write for them many years ago, I have access to all of the stuff on D&D Beyond, including the Lord of the Rings book. And that is what I am showing now. We're going to go to View All, because I can't. And we'll go to, let's see. There we go, Lord of the Rings. Go to our Lord of the Rings section, and if you go straight into Chapter 1, right up front, it says the One Ring for 5e. The present volume converts the best-selling The One Ring role-playing game to 5e, bringing the world created by J.R. Tolkien to the players of the most popular set of rules for fantasy role-playing or fantasy gaming. This is not a standalone game. To play the Lord of the Rings role-playing, you must be familiar with the rules for 5e. Which is really interesting. It means that character creation, monsters, exploration, treasure, all the things like that are in this book. But it does not describe to you in this book how to play the game. That their expectation with this book is you already know how to play or already have the rules somewhere to be able to play a 5e game. Now, it does mean that you can certainly pick up the rules to play this game for free online in both the 5.1 system reference document, which contains all of the core 5e rules, and in the D&D basic rules, which are still available. I don't know if they're going to be available forever, but they're available right now. A downloadable PDF copy of the D&D basic rules. If you do a search for D&D basic rules, you can pick them up for free. And that has all the rules for how to play 5e. So if you have those PDFs, you can run this game without needing anything at all. But there is an expectation, and I didn't really realize it until I opened the PDF and was reading through it. I'm like, I don't think it actually tells you how to play. It tells you how to play all the Lord of the Rings parts of it, but it's not telling you how to play the RPG overall. And I thought that was interesting. It's not quite a standalone book. However, character classes, species, monsters, treasure, all of the other stuff that fill out a typical 5e book, you instead use this for. But it was kind of an interesting case. It still kind of fits that taking Lord of the Rings 5e and putting it in D&D Beyond meant that it's sort of the first wrapper of an entire 5e system that they brought in and put it on top of D&D Beyond. It's also interesting because it's an entire wrapper that is built on top of the 5.1 SRD itself. Which means wasn't built for D&D exactly, although it says like, hey, you got to have the rules somewhere. But now is inside the D&D system. So it's the first time that the D&D ampersand sitting next to Lord of the Rings exists like all in one place. That is something that I wanted to bring up when we were talking about Lord of the Rings. It's still quite interesting. And I've only skimmed through the book and looked at the art, but I think it's a really cool looking book. And I dig it. I don't really plan on playing it. I don't really need to play RPGs in an existing IP. I'm kind of happy, other than like a campaign setting. I'm kind of happy playing with campaign settings that are built for RPGs rather than playing in like a world. But certainly there are people who are like, it's easier to drive people to play in Lord of the Rings when they know Lord of the Rings than it is to try to teach them an entire world that they don't know. But on the other hand, I still think it's kind of fun to learn that world that you never knew before. So it's still pretty neat. But again, it was $25. And I'm like, for $25 for the PDF and print copy of this, I will definitely pick that up and did. And I'm happy I did so. This past week from Polygon was an article about a role-playing game called Wanna Play Right Now. And Wanna Play Right Now is a absolutely free, released under basically the public domain, the CC0 license, which means you don't even have to reference the original work when you are using elements of this work in it. A small booklet-sized role-playing game that was based on the interview between Deborah Ann Wall and John Bernthal. There was an interview on John Bernthal's show where he was interviewing Deborah Ann Wall about all of the work that she had done. The two of them had worked together on the Daredevil series before. And he was like, I don't know what the hell this D&D stuff is. What are you even talking about? And she kind of launches right into playing D&D with him just by telling him a situation and asking him what he wants to do and going forward with that. And the person who created this game, Clement Demerog, I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names, put together this game that called Wanna Play Right Now, which is really designed to help like you show somebody what a role-playing game is like. And instead of dice rolling, you play rock, paper, scissors. And you have like advantage where you play rock, paper, scissors twice. And if you win either one of them, you succeed in a task. So it's kind of a very interesting, not quite a 50-50, sort of role, but it's a way to play an RPG with just a book and maybe some pencils and paper and stuff like that. Absolutely free to sign up, absolutely free to pick up. It's available on itch.io. You can buy it or you can download it and check it out. If you think it's cool, you can, $7 is the price that they're asking for, but you can pick it up for free. And again, it's completely released under a Creative Commons public domain license, which is it's as open a license as you can make. It says, do whatever you want, any way that you want. I am giving up all rights to it completely, which is, pretty cool thing to do. So you can find a link to that. It's called Wanna Play Right Now, linked down in the show notes. While we've been talking about different products, last week, I think I talked about this last week, are some of the products that I found myself going back to again and again. And kind of like a gift guide of what we did. And I put that together into a Sly Flourish article that's coming out today. Well, if you're listening to this on Monday, it came out today. If you're watching this on Twitch, it's coming out tomorrow. From the time of recording, it is tomorrow. But probably by the time you're seeing this, it's already out on Sly Flourish, which is a gift guide for 2024. What's a 2024 stuff that you might want to give in to the role players? And we're gonna take a look through that. But it got me onto a question. And this is something that I've heard and something that I've thought a lot about. I recommend a ton of different products on this show. I really like to shine a light on all of the work that different creators are doing out there. I like to show different Kickstarters that are happening. I like to show new products that have come out. I am surrounded by books from hundreds of different publishers, hundreds of books from hundreds of different publishers that are all kind of doing different things. And one of the questions though is like, yeah, but do you use them? Do you use these products? What products do you actually use at your table? And I have hundreds of books around me, but I use very few of them at my actual table. So then when we're thinking about really where to put your money where your mouth is, what are the products that people tend to go back to again and again? So I asked this question. I posted a question. I posted it to a bunch of different places. And the question I asked, I posted this on Blue Sky, which has got a huge surge of new TTRPG people coming into Blue Sky. I've been on Blue Sky since they had closed invites. But I never really spent a lot of time there because I'm kind of done with like how Twitter operates and the fact that Blue Sky operates pretty similar way. And now I'm seeing a lot of people going there. I don't know, but it's still a place to post stuff. And you can see I have an auto feed that auto feeds all the stuff that I make to Blue Sky. So I posted a question on Blue Sky. I posted it on YouTube where I get lots of feedback on it. I posted it to Mastodon where I get less feedback. And I posted it to EN World, the forum where I like hanging out these days. And I asked this question: what RPG books, supplements, and accessories do you find yourself using year after year? Which RPG products provide the best regular impact to your game or to your table? So my question was really to try to get people to think about the things that they go back to regularly and use at their table. And I got a bunch of responses, which I put together in a webpage. You can find a link to this down in the show notes if you want to see the actual answers. I sanitized them. I got rid of people's names. So it's not super clean, but it's a way to do it. And you can kind of read through all of the answers from all of these different places, most of them from YouTube, quite a few from Blue Sky, some from EN World, some from Mastodon, where people talked about the tools that they regularly use. And I found some kind of notable things that continually popped up. I didn't do a super deep statistical analysis to count every single product and how many times they were mentioned, which one was on top. I don't know how important that is. I don't think it's very important because the tools that matter to you are not necessarily the tools that matter to anybody else. And even the top tool mentioned was only mentioned in under 10% of the answers that were here. So it's not like one thing dominated all the conversation. Over on Blue Sky, people, when I brought up my list and I said, hey, these are common ones, people are like, well, what about the player's handbook? Or what about D&D books, period? And some people brought up, like, what about dice? No one mentioned dice. I'm like, I didn't talk about dice, and I wouldn't expect people to talk about dice because we all know you need dice. That's not interesting. What's interesting is when everybody says Chessex battle mat, right? When they pick a particular product and you're like, that's brought up a lot. That's really interesting. That's what I wanted to hear about. Player's handbook, it's like, well, I don't think DMs think very much about the player's handbook. And also, again, it's another obvious one. So putting the player's handbook at the top would not necessarily be that. But also, a lot of people aren't playing 5e. And a lot of places that I ask, people are playing games that aren't necessarily 5e. So it makes sense that they wouldn't pick the player's handbook. So don't read too much into like what this, into what the answers are. To me, these are like the notable things that I saw that people kept bringing up and brought up more than once as tools that are directly helping them run their game. Worlds Without Number, and it was mentioned there was a few different Without Number games. This is made by Kevin Crawford. You can pick this up on Drive-Thru RPG. I have copies of this. And there's Worlds Without Number, Cities Without Number, Stars Without Number. There's several of these games, and it is it's an entire role-playing game system. But one of the things that it's built around are many, many tables and tools for doing world building. And a lot of people that brought up the Worlds Beyond Number product said, like, I use this for world building a lot, and it's building societies and building continents and building out empires and building these kind of things. And he has this really interesting sort of handful of dice approach where you take all of the regular polyhedron dice and roll them, and then there's a bunch of tables for each one of the dice to sort of build a world out. I've talked about Worlds Without Number on my show before, so you can find you can dig that back up. What's interesting is you want to take a look at it and not necessarily buy it directly. There is a free version available, and also the rules for Worlds Without Number is released, like the core mechanics for it are released under a CC0 license, similar to the other one we were talking about, where he basically said, hey, my expectation is that these are not copyrightable. I don't believe they are copyrightable. I don't think they should be copyrightable. So I'm going to ensure that my rules are not copyrightable by making them CC0. They are now out and available to everybody. Anybody can use them. That's the core sets of rules. And that doesn't really include all the random tables, which is kind of the thing that people are using. But a lot of the random tables you can find in the free edition of Worlds Without Number on Drive-Thru RPG, or you can pick up the full book, which apparently lots of people have really enjoyed and used at their game. Another one is Flea Mortals. Flea Mortals came up more than once. I'm happy about this. I have a handful of monsters in Flea Mortals, and a lot of people love the super crunchy Flea Mortals books. One interesting response that I got to this on Blue Sky after I posted, hey, these are some of the top trends that I'm seeing, was Mike Merles, the lead designer of 5th edition D&D, who said, I can't believe I forgot about Flea Mortals. It has replaced the monster manual for me. And it's one thing for Flea Mortals to replace the monster manual of any given customer. It's something else when the lead designer of the product replaced their own book with Flea Mortals. So that I think is pretty interesting. People definitely like Flea Mortals. Monstrous Menagerie and Trials and Treasure, they came up pretty often too. Again, I went on EN World, and there's a lot of people on EN World who use those books. Again, don't get bound up about statistical significance and, I don't think you did a proper survey. I'm not testing cancer drugs. I'm not here trying to change global economics. I'm telling you that, hey, a bunch of people came forward in the places that I asked and said that these tools are good. Don't read too deeply into them, and you don't have to tell me about how my statistics, my analysis is incorrect. I already know that. But they still brought up Monstrous Menagerie a lot. And I looked at it and I love Monstrous Menagerie. It's my favorite monster book. I really, really dig it. And I've talked about how Monstrous Menagerie and Trials and Treasure work really well side by side and are the complete GM replacement of 5e. Whatever 5e game you're playing, the Monstrous Menagerie and Trials and Treasure can sit on your side and run the whole game. I did it last night. It's a fantastic set of books. The Monstrous Menagerie and Trials and Treasure are excellent, and they are well used. Knave 2 by Ben Milton wasn't one mentioned as well. Also, there's Maze Rats, and there's the PDF of Knave 2. I have a copy of Knave 2, and this was kickstarted recently, came out, was published, and a very lightweight book, and filled with a lot of D100 random tables for all kinds of things. And that's why people really brought up this book as something they go to again and again, that they really like all of the tables that are inside Knave, the Knave 2nd edition. I think this book also brings up an example of one of the particular ways that a tool becomes really useful for people is its physical usability. One of the things about Knave 2 is that it's a small digest-sized book that is easy to throw in your backpack or whatever pack you've got, or it's easy to keep at the table next to you and flip through. It's not that many pages. They're very information-dense pages that have lots of like rollable tables in a small amount of space, and that physical usability really matters. That this book is just physically easy to use, and that makes it a really valuable book. Knave was mentioned far more often than any Dungeon Master's Guide was mentioned inside the results that I got. So take that for what it's worth. But I think that made Knave particularly interesting and showed up a lot. If you want to check out Knave, you can, of course, get the PDF or the print version. I would get the print version with the PDF if you want it. But also, Ben Milton came up with Maze Rats, which also has a whole bunch of different tables that are available in there. You can get that booklet for $15, but you can also get the PDF of Maze Rats for $5. So for $5, you can get a smaller version that also contains a whole bunch of these ideas of D6/D6 tables. You roll a 6-sided die across the top and then a 6-sided die down the column. So it's 36 different options instead of a D100 options, but lots of the same kind of stuff. So if you want to check that out, and Maze Rats is released under a Creative Commons license as well, which means if you're a publisher, you can use those lists and other things that you've got. And there's actually, it is actually available on GitHub in Markdown files that you can throw into your Obsidian notebook. So that's pretty cool too, if you want to get all those tables. Lots of people mentioned Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, Forge of Foes, and the Lazy DM's Companion. Obviously, selection bias matters, and I was the one asking the question, so I was on their mind, and so they brought up the books that I happen to publish. I'm very happy to hear it, but many people did say these are books that I go to again and again and use at my table, and I'm very happy about that. I think that's really outstanding. By the way, those books right now are still 20% off on the Sly Flourish bookstore. If you go to the Sly Flourish bookstore, you can get them 20% off and free domestic shipping with a coupon code. You will get the 20% discount happens on checkout, and you can plug in the discount code if you are in the continental United States. You can drop that in and get free shipping on your physical books for Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, Forge of Foes, and Lazy DM's Companion. So I'm very happy to see that these books are as directly table usable as I wanted them to be. This is something I definitely kept in mind when I made these books. When Scott and Teos and I were talking about Forge of Foes, we made sure that we wanted to have table practical stuff that you could use from Forge of Foes right then. Build monsters, modify monsters, reskin monsters, change up monsters, all the things that we wanted to give you so that you could modify monsters as you were playing your game. And I do it. I did it back then, and I'm doing it now. I did it last night. I whipped up Forge of Foes monsters, and they work great. Lazy DM's Companion, same kind of thing. This is a book that's designed for you to use every time you're sitting to prep your game. A bunch of different tables that you can roll on to help you build out scenarios for your game. And Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master with the 8 steps and all the other advice to help you kind of prep your game. Justin Alexander's So You Want to Be a Game Master was also mentioned quite a bit. So that's his book about how to be a game master. Talks about a lot of the techniques that he's talked about on the Alexandrian. Really good book, very well regarded and very popular. You can check that out. One I hadn't really heard of, I've heard about it. Like my friend Teos said, oh yeah, I picked that up at GameholeCon. It was really cool. And I heard other people talking about the Discord server, but I hadn't paid much attention to it, was Monster Overhaul. And so yesterday I picked it up and I bought the PDF and the print version of it, $60, so a little costly. You can pick it up from Indie Press Revolution, and it takes an entirely different approach at looking at monsters. I'm going to do just we're not going to do like a whole preview of it. I only just got it, so I really haven't given an full in-depth look, but it looks really, really cool. And basically what it does is it's a monster book. It's focused like a monster book is focused, but heavy on random tables for all of the different monsters and what you can do. So any given monster that you pick is going to have sets of random tables that help you define that particular encounter for that particular monster. There are 20 types of monsters and then 10 monsters in each type. So you can actually directly use it as a random table of rolling a die to see what kind of type of monster and then what monster within that type. Piles and piles, and a big section up front that says like, here's how to get the most out of this book. You want to read this section. That's really good. But, lots of talk about, random encounters. There's layers and maps. Here's like adventurers. It uses old school stats. So more sort of your OD&D, OSE, lightweight stats for things. Hit dice based. But the stat block is basically nil. So you almost don't even need to worry about the stat block. I'm not even exactly sure what system it matches directly. It's all of these other tables, like the 1D100 adventurers that you have here and what they do and what they're dressed like and any other notable characteristics, names and everything like that. That's where the meat of this book really lies. And that's what people are finding directly usable at their table. What I particularly love about Monster Overhaul is if you are a 5th edition player, Monster Overhaul with Forge of Foes together gives you a really awesome set of books. One that talks about all of the ways to think about your monsters in the game from Monster Overhaul, and then how to build the monster statistically so that it's interesting at your table using Forge of Foes. So I think it works really well side by side with Forge of Foes. Really outstanding book. I just picked it up yesterday, so I only have so much knowledge of it. But I really liked what I've seen. So lots of people brought up Monster Overhaul. People also brought up Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And this is where people are like, why is it Xanathar's Guide to Everything, but not the Monster Manual and not the Player's Handbook? Well, I didn't really do a big search for how many people mentioned the Player's Handbook, but very few did. And a lot of people said, well, I use my monster books, right? And it could be any monster book. I was more interested in kind of the ones that were not totally expected, right? If you totally thought it should be there, it was probably there. But it was the other ones that were kind of interesting that people are still using. And Xanathar's Guide was one of them. And I actually think that's true. Xanathar's Guide, I think, might be the best book for 5th edition D&D that wasn't one of the core books. And it's because it served a couple of purposes, offering new character options on top of the ones from the Player's Handbook to give all of 5e a lot more life. And also a lot of GM tools to help you run your games, including random encounter tables, including an alternative way to do character encounter building, including a lot of different things. And I think it did it in a way that Tasha's did not. Tasha's was not mentioned on this list very much, but Xanathar's was. I think that's really telling. Now, some of it is Xanathar's has been out for a long time. We're all really used to using it. But I just think Xanathar's is a better book. I think of the two, Xanathar's and Tasha's. Tasha's is the only book where I had stuff that was directly published by Wizards of the Coast that wasn't part of a setting that I banned at my table. And it also didn't really offer very much on the GM side that I found particularly interesting. It was also sort of this half measure between D&D 2014 and 2024. Now that we have 2024, I think a lot of the stuff that was in Tasha's isn't really relevant anymore, where Xanathar's may still be. So Xanathar's Guide was mentioned quite a bit. A few people mentioned Ironsworn. Ironsworn is a solo/group play RPG. You can download all the rules for free. I've talked about Ironsworn on this show. People really like Ironsworn. And it has tons of random tables. It's got really cool oracle tables to kind of help you drive story and direction, stochastic. I really dig that. So check out Ironsworn. And again, links to all of this stuff are going to be down in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about finding them. Raging Swan was mentioned a few times. No one particular product was mentioned overall, but Raging Swan overall, the Dread Thingonomicon, the GM Miscellany, those were brought up. I've talked about them on this show. And then a physical tool that a lot of people brought up was the Chessex Wet Erase Battle Mat. Now, I am a Pathfinder. I don't want to define myself by the mat that I use, but I have used the Pathfinder basic flip mat a lot. I recommend it highly. I've talked about it. It's $20. Folds up nicely in your bag. You can work with wet or dry erase. It's a great mat. But so many people have brought up the Chessex mat to me, and it's been so long since I've had one. I definitely have had a couple in my day. But it's been so long since I've had one that I ordered one again, and I should have it here. And my plan is to give that one a good go and really use the Chessex Battle Mat for a while, because now I'm into wet erase markers. I talked last week about the Stedler 315-9 medium point black wet erase marker that I love so much. That will work on any of these mats. And so I wanted to actually try it with the Chessex Wet Erase Battle Mat and see, do I like it better? I think a lot of people just pick one and use it forever, which is what I did with the other mat because it serves the purpose. So what else do you need? But these being two of the most popular battle mats, I wanted to try them both. And then I can give you some thoughts and feelings about that. So expect that to come. Again, this all came from those responses. If you want to look at the responses, you can find a list in the show notes below. And then, of course, I have my list. What are the things that if I was answering this question, what are the things that I have found myself going to? And I have a couple different lists that I want to talk about. One is like the actual list of stuff I use, and then the stuff that I'm recommending because I have used this stuff in the past. Just a little different. I use Dyson Maps all the time. No one should be surprised that I use Dyson Maps. I go to the Dyson Logos website to find maps, but I also even wrote for my Patreon a Dyson map gallery from the commercially available maps maps that makes it very easy to find a Dyson map that you can use in your game. I use Dyson Maps in basically all of my games, and I really love it. I built my own random generator that does a whole bunch of different things. That's available to patrons of Sly Flourish, but I wrote my own random generator because I've never been happy with any of the ones that I found. I have very particular things that I want my random generator to do, so I used Perchance to make my own. It's very big. It's got a huge source. It works, and it makes everything from monuments and quests and NPCs and treasure, one-off magic items, like relic-style magic items, all different kinds of things you can generate with the generator. I use it all the time. I'd be lying if I said I didn't use my own books. And of course, it makes sense that I use my own books because I wrote them for a purpose, and why not write them for me when I actually want to use that stuff? So I use Forge of Foes and the Lazy DM's Companion all the time. I've actually cut up my copy of Lazy DM's Companion and put it into my own notebook. I pulled one of my Lazy DM workbook. I also use the workbook. There are things in the workbook that I still use a lot, but then there's a lot of the workbook that I haven't used in a while. That's because it's an older book. It's been around for a while. And a lot of the best stuff from that I put into the Lazy DM's Companion as well. So if you had to pick one of those two, Lazy DM's Companion is the one I'd pick. However, there is a set of tables in the Lazy DM's workbook that I think are great, which is the Monsters by Dungeon level tables that aren't in the Companion that I still use. And in fact, I thought I had them in my book, and it turns out I had cut them out to put them in my other book. So I have a book up here that's maimed because I took it out. Monstrous Menagerie and Trials and Treasure, I already talked about that. The Midgard World book is one that I've recommended. I use this book all the time. I've used it for 3 campaigns now, and it's such a fantastic, deep, rich campaign book that I find myself going back to it again and again. Pathfinder Flip Mat, I've talked about that. My Lazy Monster tokens, handmade tokens, very easy to make, cost you about maybe like $30 or $40 for startup costs, but once you're started up, you can make a couple hundred tokens. You can make multiple sets. These are generic monster tokens that you can use to take to conventions, that you can run to games, and you never need to worry about buying any more miniatures once you have these tokens. And I have my 5e cheat sheet that I use. I haven't used this recently because, again, the Companion has stuff like this in it, but the cheat sheet just says like, hey, these are the skills that are associated with different abilities. These are the effects of status effects, and a few other things that are on the cheat sheet. I will have a link to the cheat sheet. And then we have my actual gift guide. Again, the gift guide you can find on slyflourish.com. It's also in the newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, consider subscribing to the newsletter. And then what I recommend are some of the things that I just talked about. The Pathfinder Flip Mat Basic, I think, is a great gift. $16 if you buy it directly from them. So very, very cheap, very durable. You can use it forever. Works with any kind of thing. And again, the Stedler Lumicolor Medium Black Model 315-9 is my favorite wet erase marker that goes along with that. But I really want to try the Chessex vinyl mat, and maybe I will change my mind on that. The Midgard World book I mentioned, Demon Cults and Secret Societies. I was dismayed. This is a book from Kobold Press. Again, for all the campaigns that I've run, I keep going back to because it's really cool to drop cults into your game. I love cults. Unfortunately, it is out of print, so you cannot get a physical print version. My wife went to go, when she was doing some fact checking on this article before we published it, she went to go look. It's like, it's out of print. You cannot get it in the Kobold Press store, and they're on eBay for like $100. So that means they've actually gone up in value because there was only like a single print run done of Demon Cults and Secret Societies, and it's not available for print on demand, which is unfortunate. You can get the PDF, and it is still worth getting the PDF, but it's a bummer that it is not available in physical version. Trials and Treasure and Monstrous Menagerie, I already talked to death. DM's Companion, I talked to death. The Shadowdark Quick Start rules are the other one that I recommend in the gift guide because it is something that I go back to again and again. Whenever I go to a convention, I'm going to be grabbing my 2 Shadowdark Quick Start rule books and some character cards and throwing them in because I think it's the best way to do like an impromptu 5e fantasy RPG. It's super fast, super easy. The rules are free online. You can send out PDFs of the rules to your players online because they can download it for free. And the physical version is like $20, and it's totally worth it. I'd buy a couple copies if I were you. And that way you have a copy that you can throw in your go bag. So when you're going to a convention and you want to run a fantasy RPG, Shadowdark is super easy to learn, super fun. Great game, and I really love it. So those are the gifts that I offer. So that's kind of my exploration of the products that I think really matter at our table, the ones that we find ourselves going to. A final thought on this is the kind of books that we see. And there's kind of a few different ones, but 2 stand out to me as like, wow, people really resonate with these kinds of books. One is lots of books with random tables in them. Almost all of these books have some kind of random table to them. Not all of them, but many of them have some kind of random tables to help kind of shake up your mind and give you ideas for your campaign. I think that's really something a lot of GMs resonate with, and you might resonate with it too. However, I have a feeling that once you find the kind of random tables and random books that help you kind of don't need more than that. So there comes a point where it's like they're diminishing returns. You're not going to bring 17 different books of random tables to your table, or even during prep. prep, you're going to go to that one book that's easy to use, that you understand, that has the tables that help you, and that's what you're going to use. For me, that's the Lazy DM's Companion, because I wrote my own tables that help support my needs. But many people go back to Knave because Knave is super easy to use. Other ones use like the Tome of Adventure Design. Other ones use Raging Swan. We all have sort of different sets of random tables that we like that work at our table. And then the other set is monster books, right? We can see Forge of Foes on here. We see the Monstrous Menagerie on here. We see Flea Mortals on here. There was lots of press. I already talked to death about Kobold Press, so I didn't put a lot of Kobold Press stuff on this list. But Tome of Beasts is on there. Lots of different books that are coming out. People love their monster books. Monster books and books of random tables seem to be highly valuable tables to help GMs at their table. That I thought was particularly interesting. And then a couple of books that help you directly with your prep and advice, like Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master and So You Want to Be a Game Master, were both books that came up there. So those were interesting responses to me. I don't think that means that every publisher on the planet should start doing nothing but monster books and books on random tables, because again, once you've got the one you like Flea Mortals, you might not need any others. But I think that was kind of an interesting thing. So this whole exercise was interesting to me. I learned at least one new book that I had not been paying attention to, which was Monster Overhaul, which I think I really dig. But I think this is a good opportunity for you to kind of explore the sort of products that you find are really helping you run the games at your table, to give you an idea of what are the kind of books that you want to be seeking to help you flesh out the game that you've got. Just another quick reminder, we are 20% off of all books on the Sly Flourish bookstore. If you don't have all of your favorite Sly Flourish books, if you want to pick up books like Forge of Foes, Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, The Lazy DM's Companion, the workbook, or all the fantastic books, all of them are 20% off right now, both digital copies and physical copies. You get the discount on checkout. Once you put them into your cart and go into checkout, you will see the discount in the checkout. Also, if you are in the continental United States and you spend $60 or more on your order, you can add the coupon code FREESHIPPING60 and you will get free shipping for books. We're going to see if this is going to put us into bankruptcy or not. We'll know that next month. But right now, I'll tell you, it's a really good deal. So it's a really good opportunity for you to get free shipping on Sly Flourish books right now on the Sly Flourish bookstore. Again, you will get the discount on books, both digital and physical. When you add them to your cart, you can see the discounts in your cart. And if you want free shipping in the continental United States, you can use the coupon code FREESHIPPING60, which you have to add in during checkout in order to get your deal. But some fantastic deals. This is the last couple of days. Like if you're getting this on Monday, it's going to end on Wednesday. So this is pretty much your last chance to get in on this sale. We're very happy to do it and very excited to bring a lot of our favorite products, a lot of my favorite products, to you and your table. Let's get into the December 2024 Patreon Q&A. I want to start with an announcement about the Patreon Q&A. I'm going to be changing it slightly in 2024. Instead of it being the monthly Q&A, it is going to be a quarterly Q&A. However, patrons that are asking questions can still ask one question a month on the quarterly thread. And I will still answer all of the questions every Friday like I've done. And I will still use those questions and bring some of those questions here to the show so that we can dive in deeper. The only difference is instead of announcing the Q&A every month, I'm going to be announcing it every quarter. The reason I'm doing this is to help me with some of my workflow, because what tends to happen is I post the new Q&A and I get 30 questions right away. And then the first Friday, I put the post out on the first Thursday of the first full week of the month at noon. And by 8 o'clock the next morning, I usually have about 30 new questions. And that's because it's great. New patrons have been coming to the Sly Flourish Patreon. I love all of you. You're fantastic people, and I want to answer all of your questions. But what tends to happen is all of the questions come up front, and then it trails off. And I still get a good 5 to 10 questions a week after that, more than that, usually 10 to 15 questions a week that I get. But that first batch of like 30 questions makes my day kind of hard. And what ends up happening is that the answers to those questions aren't as good because I'm not spending as much time because I know I've got 30 questions I got to get through before I got to start the rest of my day. So instead, I'm going to move that pain from every month to every quarter. That way I'm doing it I'm doing it 1/3 less than I normally would. So starting January, we're going to have the first quarter Q&A, which covers January, February, March. And then in April, I'll post a new Q&A. And then in July, the next one, July, and then September, I think is how it's going to work. So I'm going to do 4 Q&A posts per year. But patrons can still ask one a month, so you're not limited. I asked for the honor system. You are not limited to only 2/3 less. Thank you for correcting my math. 2/3 less. Yes, 1/3 as much. So it'll just help me be able to spend more time with the questions over the entire course of the year than it is to try to have to do them all up front, like happens with the Q&A today. So that's going to happen next month. This month, December, same as it's been. And then there will still be a January post, but the January post, I'm only going to post for January, February, March. And that way it'll be quarterly. Still available to all patrons of Sly Flourish, whether you're hero tier or veteran tier. You still get to answer questions there, and you still get to answer a question a month. Only now I am kind of relying on you to remember to ask a question a month rather than telling you, hey, the new month is open and it's time to ask new questions. And that way, because I get such an onslaught of new questions. Anyway, on to the questions. Some of these actually are not December. They're actually November questions that I move forward into December. Christopher L. says, when world building, how much outlining of the neighboring towns and settlements is useful to do? I find like having information like this available to the players is part of what allows them to direct themselves through a campaign, but I'm still new at this. Should it just be brief descriptions and have some rumors prepared for them, or is it wiser to know the makeup of the governing bodies, the way their justice system works, etc.? Can you recommend an outline for something like this? So that first question of is it useful to do is your question to ask yourself, not necessarily a question to ask for me. Different GMs find things to be useful for them than other GMs. I probably would not be spelling out all of the neighboring towns with their governing systems and justice systems and economics and other things until I knew that that was going to be something that's going to get in front of the players. If they're heading towards one of those places, now you might spend more time thinking about it. There's an idea that I brought up that I call like 2 horizons out. I've heard it brought up on other blogs as like think 3 hexes out. But the idea is you want to know everything in the current horizon of the characters. So everything the characters can see by going to a tall point and looking around. That you want to fill out because they could go to any one of those places. Think like if you go to a city, you generally want to know the places that they're going to be able to reach in that session in that city, which can be really hard if that city is water deep, right? It can be really big. But you're not really worried about filling out Neverwinter or Luskin or Daggerford if they're not heading there yet. But you might want to know that there is a Luskin and Neverwinter and Daggerford that are around Waterdeep, kind of around Waterdeep. And you might drop in little secrets and clues about some things that like Luskin is run by a bunch of pirates. Neverwinter is, built atop the ruins of the old city. What I don't even know anything about it. I just know it was in Baldur's Gate. It was in Baldur's Gate 2. So you can decide how much you need, but I would tend to, so when I think about the 2 horizons out, you want to know what's in the immediate horizon, and then you would have a loose view of the things that are just over the horizon, the things that the characters could do one session out from where you are, because those are the sorts of things where you want to have an idea of what you need to fill in when they start to head in that direction. But I would say start with less, and then ask yourself if you wish you had more, and then add that more before I would do a lot and then realize that you did too much. So start with as little as you can and build out from there rather than as much as you can and then realizing you did too much. That would be my general recommendation. And get that idea of thinking like, I know that there's a City of Blades. I know that the City of Blades is ruled over by a gladiator fairy princess who has defeated everyone else in the arena. And it's built on strength and power as the main structure of governance there. The strongest rule over those who don't in the City of Blades. That's really all I know because the characters aren't really headed to the City of Blades. City of Arches I know a lot more about because they're actually hanging out in the City of Arches. So Christopher, I hope that helps. Daniel H. says, on this week's GM Prep, you talked about picking monsters for an encounter and mentioned that a giant scorpion would have a CR that was too high. What are your reasons for not simply swapping out the stat block for the appropriately scaled Forge of Foes version? If the reason has to do with the challenge level being tied to the monster's story, I would be really curious to hear more from you about it. So yes, your last sentence is the correct one. Challenge rating is not arbitrary from the story of a monster. A monster's challenge rating tells you something about that monster's fiction. It tells you about how big it is. And for example, Let's bring up Forge of Foes. In Forge of Foes, we have the famous monster statistics by challenge rating table that we put together. This is a table I use all the time. And one of the columns that we have in here is the example 5e monsters. And this is to give you an idea about what kind of monsters fit in a given challenge rating. And that way, if you're building your own monster, you have a frame of reference for what that monster is like. That a CR3 monster are knights and mummies and werewolves. A CR10 are stone golems and young red dragons. CR7s are stone giants and young black dragons, and so on. So you have an idea of like, if I'm building a monster, where do I see that monster fitting? Now, in the case of the giant scorpion, I could have made a large scorpion that's more like, the size of a really big dog, rather than a giant scorpion who's more like a giant horse. And I could have made a lower CR version of it, but I would want the flavor of the monster to sit with that. So you could say that like a large scorpion could be like a CR1, about the size of a direwolf, right? That's the sort of size of a large dog, and I could give it 2 attacks with 2 pincers, and it does 6 damage per attack, so on and so forth. Maybe it has a poison stinger that it can hit you with, or it does a pincer attack and a stinger, however I want to do it. And I can look at it and say, yeah, that's about the size of a direwolf. That makes sense. Or even a black bear. I can make a CR1 half. I can make them slightly weaker and make a CR1 half that's about the size of a black bear, and then kind of the general difficulty of the black bear. There's a famous old school gaming idea that whenever you don't have a monster, just use the bear stat block, because the bear stat block is super straightforward. And that really gets around that idea of reskinning being powerful. But yeah, the idea is I don't generally arbitrarily come up with a challenge rating first and then build a monster around the challenge rating. Instead, I think about the monster that they're facing first, and then I think about the challenge rating that fits the story of that monster, because the challenge rating does tell something about the monster. Now, a trick is CR, challenge rating, is completely abstract from every other bit of mathematics that exists inside 5e. It only relates to itself. You can only know that a CR4 is below a CR5 and above a CR3. It takes a fair bit of work to say, like, well, what's the comparison between a CR4 and a level 5 character? The problem is the number of characters, the number of monsters, all these other things start to have an effect on the math. And so we have an equivalent character level, which kind of tells you in a 1-to-1 fight for a hard encounter, a CR6 is about the equivalent of a level 11 character. That's about as close as you can get to comparing characters to levels, and even that's not perfect. But CR alone doesn't really tell you anything except the general difficulty of the monster from 0 to 30. And you can kind of pick a number, 0 being a rat and 30 being a world-ending horror. But that still gives you an idea. So that's when I said, like, maybe if I look at a giant scorpion and I say, yeah, that's too tough, I'm just not going to use the giant scorpion. If I really wanted a scorpion, I could have made a large one. Instead, I think I just found another kind of monster. I don't remember what it was, but I had them fight another kind of monster instead of the giant scorpions. I think I made giant wasps, which worked fine too. And giant wasps fit the story because they're not as big as a giant scorpion is. Xeno66 says, I've been playing 2014 D&D and using D&D Beyond. I noticed an update available on my rented copy of the 2014 Player's Handbook. My players and I have physical copies of the Player's Handbook as well. I'm concerned that updating the digital copy on D&D Beyond is going to get us out of sync with the physical 2014 books. Do you know if the updates make it such that players and their digital character sheets will essentially now be using the D&D 2024 rule set? Feels like more evidence for the advice that you've given over the years that using the physical materials is essential for us to control how we play our games and enjoy our hobby. Yes, I will tell you this. The update on, if you're talking about the D&D Beyond app that you have on your phone, which I think is what you're talking about, because I think that's the only area where they have like a button that says update it. Really, that just updates formatting and errors and stuff like that. It will push errata. So if they have, it is based on whatever the rule sets are that are on D&D Beyond. And an example is if you had the 2024 Player's Handbook, and you clicked update on it, it's going to bring in the stealth errata that has occurred on D&D 2024 that they have not announced anywhere, but people have discovered. This kind of does chat my ass quite a bit. There should be a changelog that shows you what differences they made on the D&D 2024 Player's Handbook that's different from the physical version. Everyone's like, well, maybe when the monster manual is out, they'll put it out now. But come on, tell us right now. You made changes to the rules already. The rules are now different in D&D Beyond than they are in the physical book. Why don't you have a changelog somewhere? Hey, Wizards of the Coast, if you're listening, put out a change log of all of the changes that you've made to the D&D 2024 rules on a webpage somewhere, ideally in a PDF so that you can download it and stick it in your book and say, these are the errata for the changes. They did that previously. They're not doing it now. I don't know why. However, you do not have to worry about clicking that update version and that suddenly all of your 2014 stuff is going to turn into 2024 stuff or some weird mix or conglomerate. Most of the time it's fixing direct formatting issues, small things. Honestly, I have never noticed a difference when I've updated it. The only time I noticed an update was recently they put out the 2024 free rules and they put out way too much stuff. And I had downloaded those free rules to my D&D Beyond app on my phone. And then they're like, oh, we put out too much, and they pulled it back. And I was like, well, as long as I don't click update, I should be able to keep the rules with all the extra stuff. But I already had the full 24 player's handbook anyway. I already had that one. So it served me no purpose in keeping the free rules that way. But that was an example where it's like, you know, if you update, you actually lose a lot of stuff, right? For some people, that might have been the case, and maybe they didn't click update. And maybe if you did, you shouldn't click update because you're going to lose all the things that they gave away and then decided to take back later. Because you can do that in a centralized system, but you can't do that when you know, it's not like the player's handbook. They go, oh, we really should have only given you 3 subclasses, not 4. And then they take, you know, then their book suddenly shrinks. Jeremy Crawford comes in with an X-Acto knife and cuts out all the extra subclasses that they put in. That's not going to happen. But generally, so in the specifics of this, I would not worry about clicking the update button. But in the larger sense, I am bothered by the fact that probably would mean, it's probably not going to mean it for 2014. For your 2014 books, you don't have to worry about anything. I wouldn't worry about it. Other than the fact that you're using a centralized system, you know, to manage D&D 2014 with D&D Beyond and everything like that, and all the problems that I've been talking about with that. But you don't have to worry about it completely dorking up the 2014 books based on the 2024 rules. I don't think that is something you have to be concerned about. I do really think that Wizards of the Coast, I think they're doing a disservice to their fans and customers by not telling them what rules have changed between D&D Beyond and the 2024 published book. They should put that in PDF. They did it before. I don't know why they're not doing it now. If their answer is we're going to wait until the monster manual comes out, tell us that. Put that in the community update. That would be great. Tell us what your plan is. Because right now, you look like jerks because you're holding back errata. There's things that are different on D&D Beyond than there are in the physical book. It's going to cause arguments. It's going to cause confusion. The fact that there's like an EN world thread that we have to keep up to keep track of this stuff, that's not how this should work. But generally speaking, don't worry about clicking that update button. Justin Yu says, Mike, do you think the 4th edition DMG? I think it's like, what do you think of the 4th edition DMG? Do you think its information is competitive with your Forge of Foes, DMG 24, Tales of Valiant GMG, and A5e Trials and Treasure? So a lot of people talk about the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, and they talk about how good it is. And I was like, I don't really remember much of it. Like, I used it a lot. Like, I played a lot of 4th edition. Sly Flourish, the website, was built upon helping 4th edition Dungeon Masters play 4th edition. But I never really thought much about it. But then for this question, I was like, I should go take another look. One of the things I have that I love is because they made all the old versions available in PDF is I've got one directory on my laptop that has every version of the core rules for D&D up through 4th edition. And I don't have 5th edition, and that pisses me off. Why don't you give me PDFs of 5th edition? But I do have the 4th edition we're doing the Dungeon Master's Guide. And so I was like, I'm going to take another look at it. And I have 2 answers to your question. The first answer is, it is a really good Dungeon Master's Guide. Like, I forgot how good this Dungeon Master's Guide is, but it is a very, very good Dungeon Master's Guide. However, it is really built for 4th edition D&D, and I don't think it's necessarily worth picking up if you're not playing 4th edition D&D. A lot of the best advice that you find in here, you can find in other books. They are either in like the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, they're in Tales of the Valiant's Game Master's Guide, they're in my books, they're in lots of other places. So I don't think that by picking up this book and looking through it, it's fun as a historical look. So if you're into just like me, I bought every one of them, right? I have 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3.5. I can't get 3rd edition, but I can get 3.5, 4th edition, OD&D, and the Rules Cyclopedia. So I've got like all these versions of these old versions because I like having them and I like going through and seeing like how things changed over time. I like looking at the 2nd edition books and digging into those. It's kind of fun for me to do. But if you're looking for like actually valuable books that you're going to be able to use at your game, I don't think I would recommend the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide unless you're just interested in looking at the history of it. But it's really interesting that more so than the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide focused and organized itself correctly to kind of teach new DMs what DMing is like. Player motivations in here, the whole thing about how to run the game, what the Dungeon Master style, tips from the pros, right in here is a thing from James Wyatt, who ended up writing for the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide as well. The kinds of games that are going on. But then there is so much sort of 4th edition specific stuff in here that you're really not going to get a lot. But here's that 1 hour rule of thumb. Like, what can you spend your 1 hour? Look at this. This is directly in the 2024 one, and also has the same problem, which is the expectation that you're running a published adventure. If you're going to run in 1 hour, run a published adventure. I think that they should build that time. I love the time idea. What do you do if you have so much time available? Where should you spend it? I'm going to steal that and put it in a book. Only in my version, it will be, here's what you do if you have a published adventure, and here's what you do if you are homebrewing an adventure. Because I actually think that sometimes homebrewing is faster than running a published adventure. So it's very interesting. And, you can pick it up on D&D Beyond. I don't know how much it costs. I'd probably wait till you can find a sale on it, or you get some other reason to get it if you wanted to dig in the artifacts. But it's pretty interesting. But then it gets a lot into skill challenges, which I don't like. I think their system for running skill challenges never really worked well. Neither did they, because they don't put it in future books. A lot of the combat stuff is all really built around 4th edition combat ideas. But I think a lot of people like it, and a lot of people look back very fondly on it for running their games. I think that this is the one also that had I'm trying to remember where it was. Look, they even have dungeon tiles in the back of the book. What are you going to do? Cut those out? And hey, look, here's their online play their 3D virtual tabletop that they're going to put in play. That's kind of funny. They have adventures in here. They have a city in here. So the Greyhawk stuff, you remember they put Greyhawk into the other one that's not unheard of, because they have the Nentir Vale in here. People really love the Nentir Vale. But here's a whole adventure set in the town of Fallcrest. Again, hey, here's an actual thing you can run. But I'm trying to remember. I thought there was a page in here. Here's a whole dungeon building system that uses their dungeon tiles. So there's a lot of neat stuff in here, but I just don't think a lot of it is directly table usable if you're not running a 4th edition game. But it is a very interesting book. And looking back on it, because I hadn't really opened it in a while, looking back on it, it was very interesting to kind of remember the sort of stuff that this book had and how it fit into the organizational structure. And then how, it kind of missed the mark with the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide. Although I still think the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide is an underappreciated book, because I think it's got a lot of valuable stuff in there to help you prep and run your games, or to prep your games in particular. That's just kind of misorganized. Disorganized. Andrew D says, I've been running a resilient weekly game by following your advice and having a larger roster of players and playing every week as long as there are at least 2. However, I'm worried that we run into issues when players enter the action in the middle of something like a dungeon crawl with full health and spell slots due to not being present for the encounters along the way. What do you think the solution is? Stop caring. Don't worry about it. And, it's kind of my answer for a lot of things, because I'm lazy. And the answer is, so one guy walks in with a lot of other resources. The other players are not going to be jealous. They'll be like, oh, thank God someone here still has all their heal spells. And you can always kind of tune things a little bit if you realize, hey, a new character's coming in that has all of their stuff. You can add another monster. You can beef up their hit points a little bit. You can use the dials of monster difficulty if you feel like the challenge is not going to be there in the fights where it should be challenging. Again, you don't have to go dork with every encounter to make everything perfectly balanced in every fight. But if you're going into a boss fight or something like that, and you want to have that tension of the boss fight really there, that's when you might ask yourself, is the fact that this player is coming in, the character is coming in with their full load of stuff, is that going to change what this battle is like, and do I need to account for that? It could be lightning rods. It could be you want to show off those cool abilities that the guy still has. So generally, I would ignore it. And if you are going to pay attention, the way to pay attention is to dork with things on the DM side of the screen, like adding another monster or two, or giving monsters a little bit more resilience themselves with some extra hit points. Maybe they do a little bit more damage, or maybe the environment of the encounter is a little bit against the characters, a little bit more against the characters than it was. Maybe there's more traps. But again, I say that stuff, but that stuff is not the default. The default is you just keep playing. You only use that stuff when you feel like it's going to make the game more fun and more interesting, and it's going to mix up those upward and downward beats, and it's going to make your players more engaged and have everybody have a good time. That's why we dork with things. We don't dork with things to punish them for the fact that their character didn't have resources or came in with too many resources. We're doing it to make sure that the tension of the game is where we want it to be and where we think the game is going to be fun. So generally speaking, I hear you, and I know totally what you're meaning, and I've seen it in my own games where a character shows up and they have all their stuff, and you're like, why is it fair that that guy has everything? These other guys don't have anything. Only in the most extreme circumstances would I might talk to that player and say, hey, in order for your journey to get here, you would have lost, these 3 spell slots, or you would have lost 2 of your hit dice, or you would have already expended these things. You can do that, but players are not going to like it. And again, you're kind of punishing them for having not been there, and that's not great either. I mean, you're not really doing it, but it's going to trigger a loss aversion kind of thing. So instead, I just wouldn't worry about it. And instead of lowering things on their side, you raise things on the other side if you need to. And you probably don't need to. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's show. I really enjoyed it. If you like this show, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. You can find a link in the show notes. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator for signing up with a micro version of 5e that you can run at your table today. And you get a weekly RPG related article with links to all of the other work that I do and an article to help you run your game. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of tips, tools, tricks, source books, adventures, and things to help you run your games. And you get access to the awesome Lazy GM community, the Patreon Q&A, and you help me put on shows like this. Thank you so much to the patrons. And this is your last warning to head over to the Sly Flourish bookstore to get 20% off of all books, including digital and physical books. And if you're in the continental United States, you can get free shipping in the continental United States for the holidays. Please check that out on the Sly Flourish bookstore. Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, Lazy Games Workbook, Lazy Games Companion, Forge of Foes are all on sale. Now is the best time. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play a role-playing game.